Hello and welcome to the webinar for the third call for proposals to the Psychiatry Consortium. I'm Dr. Laura Ajram and I'm the Psychiatry Consortium Programme Manager. And today I'll be providing you with all of the information you need to submit an application to our current funding opportunity. Throughout the webinar, please feel free to submit your questions to the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. There'll be time to discuss all of these questions at the end of the presentation. If you need any technical assistance, please let us know through the chat function. As this is a webinar, we can't see or hear you, so please do use those two functions to engage with us. Please feel free to submit questions at any point and we'll come back to them at the end. So today I'm going to start with a brief background to the consortium, including who we are and what we do, and we will move on to the particulars of this specific call. We've refined the scope of this call and clarified some details from previous engagements. So whether you're totally new to the Psychiatry Consortium or you've applied before, there'll be new information here for everyone. We will also cover the application process, including the key questions on the application form, and I'll highlight the resources available to support you through your application. So first of all, a little about the Psychiatry Consortium. As I'm sure you all know, psychiatry is faced with a real challenge in terms of drug discovery and sourcing novel drug targets at the moment. Combining this with the challenge of validating drug targets preclinically and the high failure rate in clinical trials, the development in this area in the last decade has meant that there's been no effective types of treatment for a long time now. The Psychiatry Consortium was established in May 2019 to make the most of the current opportunities that we're seeing in the research community. There's an increased understanding of disease biology, and emerging genetic data can inform new efforts in drug discovery. We aim to bring the worlds of academia and industry together to enable the robust validation of therapeutic targets and screening assays to industry standards. This is a truly collaborative effort, and through our funding scheme, we offer funds to support the discovery and development of new drugs, but moreover, we facilitate collaboration and access to industry and commercialization know-how. The Psychiatry Consortium is a strategic collaboration of 2 leading medical research charities and 7 pharmaceutical companies. The consortium is managed by the Medicines Discovery Catapult and supported by the Wellcome Trust via a grant which funds our academic outreach work. We're also supported by 2 contract research organisations who support us in the development and delivery of our funded research projects. The consortium acts as a syndicate whereby the partners collectively share the funding of and therefore the risk associated with drug discovery. And for applicants, this means that you'll be receiving a whole wealth of expertise and knowledge from all of these areas and all of these different sectors to produce well-rounded and robust projects. This new model of funding is unlike typical grant funding. Here we work with the applicant, we provide project management support and that key and crucial access to industry and commercial know-how. Everything we do is a real collaborative effort between the applicant, our pharma funding partners, and our partner CROs to robustly validate targets to standards which would be expected from industry so that these projects can then go on to enter a drug discovery pipeline and ultimately benefit patients. Our third call for applications for funding is now open. This will close on the 8th of March, just before midnight GMT time. And this is a hard deadline and there will be no extensions. In this call, we're especially interested in research projects which focus on the validation of novel molecular drug targets for mental health conditions. In particular, we're inviting proposals from those working in the field of psychotic disorders, affective disorders, cognitive disorders, and psychiatric symptoms associated with dementia. We're looking to fund projects that are centered around novel molecular targets. These are targets that haven't been taken through the full drug discovery process and exploited in clinical trials. And a key priority for us whilst reviewing applications is whether proposals are supported by robust evidence which links the molecular target to human disease. And of that therapeutic hypothesis being backed by substantial evidence where target modulation could have a therapeutic effect. The Psychiatry Consortium is perfectly positioned to support researchers to further develop or validate this initial package of evidence. In addition, projects which are looking to identify target modulation biomarkers or to enable tools for target validation are also in scope for this call. I mentioned the requirement for evidence linking the target to human disease. I'd like to focus on this a little further as we often get questions around what type of evidence is acceptable. This evidence could come in multiple forms. It could be in the form of a genetic association with risk for the disease of interest, for example, from GWAS or rare variant association studies. It could also come from preliminary human data, which has been generated either clinically or preclinically, for example, using human iPSC models, which shows the target of interest is expressed in the human brain and is specifically located in a circuit or a pathway which is known to mediate a phenotype that's relevant to mental health disorders. Finally, although a robust link to a human condition is preferable, evidence from animal models could also be accepted if that evidence suggests modulation of a well-known pathway or circuit which is known to be affected in the human condition. Applications which are supported by this robust evidence linking the target to humans and provide a sound therapeutic hypothesis of how target modulation may have a therapeutic effect stand the best chance of success. A quick note on eligibility. We accept applications from research institutions worldwide and also from small to medium-sized companies. Applications may be standalone or in collaboration with another organisation, though we would ask that there is a lead organisation who submits the form. In terms of the projects themselves, they can be up to 3 years long, and they're expected to cost anywhere between £150,000 and £1 million. Though, as I'll go on to explain, both the duration and the cost of the project are something that we work on together throughout the application development process. It's often easiest to see if your project is in scope or not by a process of elimination. So the following projects are not in scope. As I alluded to earlier, we are not looking to fund projects which are focused on well-studied targets and pathways for psychiatry diseases. Again, we're really focusing on the early end of the translational spectrum here. So projects which have advanced chemistry, such as lead molecules, for example, that only require preclinical proof of concept studies or in vivo PK are also not in scope. Likewise, non-pharmacological interventions are not something we're looking for in this call. And again, purely academic explorations of new models are also not in scope. We could look to fund aspects of exploratory work of models if that has a clear drug discovery application. So for example, if that work is part of a wider project which uses that model as a tool for validating a new target, but as a standalone project, academic explorations of models are not in scope. Again, another type of study which has some exceptions are very early target identification studies which don't have a proposed target in mind. So projects which are very early hypothesis generating studies, for example, what we may refer to as pure basic research to find a target would not be in scope here. We're also not looking to fund any research associated with repurposing existing drugs unless that use of that existing drug is used, for example, as a tool during a wider validation study. And finally, clinical trials are out of scope, or any clinical studies which require the prospective collection of human samples. If you already have human samples available, which you would like to conduct research on as part of a project, those types of studies would be eligible, and it would be seen as a resource that you will be bringing into the project. But unfortunately, we cannot support or fund the prospective collection of those samples. So this is not your only opportunity to apply for funding with us. We run multiple funding cycles per year, and you may indeed have previously applied for funding with us. This works as a cycle of funding, which I'll run through quickly now. And we start by reaching out to the research community to request applications, and that's the point we're at now. Once those applications are submitted, the applications are reviewed by our partners, and projects that are selected to progress further are then developed in collaboration with myself as the program manager and our partner CROs. Finally, projects are approved and launched, and then run in accordance with our project plan, which we will have developed together, and they're run in partnership with our CROs. At each stage of this review process, there is the potential for partners to withdraw their interest. But we hope that this process in itself, even if you aren't funded, is a useful exercise to gain crucial insight into how to develop your project, which could then go on to support future applications either to us or to other funders. The current funding round will close on the 8th of March. And the review process is, as you can see from this brief diagram, quite lengthy and iterative. So the timelines aren't exact, but we would expect that applications which are successful from this round would be ready to launch in around summer this year. I'll go through this process in more detail in a moment. But if this timeline doesn't look like something you're ready for quite now, our next funding cycle will open in summer this year. And those projects would be looking to launch towards the end of the year. So there'll be plenty of opportunities for applications in the future. So I'll now run through the application form itself in further detail and hopefully show you how the form works. So if you visit our website, under funding, we have further information on this process, which I'm outlining to you at the moment. And on each page, there is the option to apply to access our application portal. And that will bring you to our portal, which is run by Submittable. I have an account here, so I'm logged in. If you haven't used this application portal before, it will ask you to set up and register yourself, and that will give you access here. So please read the terms and conditions very carefully before you apply. This gives further information on key contractual issues and processes that must be followed should your application be successful, and also contains a lot of information on how we run the process of review and how we launch projects, so it's vital for success. This form in total is a couple of pages long. It's meant to be very high level. It's a mixture of checkboxes and free text, and so it shouldn't take too long to complete. You can start your application and save it and come back to it. And you can do this over several days once you've set up your account, so don't feel like you need to do everything in one go. So I'll take you through each section of the application form now and provide a few little bits of insight into what we're looking for, in particular around some of the key questions. The form starts with contact details for the PI, the research office, the contracts office, and these are all essential for us to work with the relevant areas of your institution or your company should your application be successful. We then move on to project-specific questions around your proposed study, the target and indication of interest. So this is where we're looking for you to outline your target of interest that you want to validate or explore. Here, as with most of the tick boxes, you have the option to select multiple. We know that obviously in psychiatry, these diseases are very heterogeneous, and so some targets may apply to more than one indication. So please do select all that apply at this point. So this next section is particularly important, which is what I was talking about just a moment ago. And this covers how the target is linked to the disease of interest. And this is a key consideration for the partners. We want to know how you propose to modulate the target and your hypothesis for why modulating the target in this way could provide a therapeutic effect. We then move on to further information on the target, specifically what is already known about the target, and essentially why your study is a good idea to advance the field and ultimately benefit patients. The next section is focused on the project plan. This should be a high-level overview, which includes the key steps in a logical manner of how you suggest that this research is delivered. So this should include key milestones and key deliverables over the project duration. This next section is particularly important. Once a project has been identified as being of interest to the partners, we work with you to further develop their project plan. To do this, we need to know what expertise and resources you can bring to the project and what you need from us. So this isn't, as I said before, this isn't a typical grant application where you tell us everything that you can do and you go off and perform your research project and execute it perfectly, and then come back in a couple of years and write a report on how well you did. We really want to support you and work with you every step of the way throughout this project. So to do that, we need to know what you need from us. And this section of the application is particularly useful in determining how we can best work collaboratively with you on the project. So where there are areas or techniques where you require support, we can fill in those gaps. Our partner CROs are highly experienced teams of scientists, all of whom have long careers in drug discovery and are able to enhance projects with their expertise, whether that's in assay development or HTS or medicinal chemistry, anything like that we can support with. So please don't worry if there are particular aspects of your proposed research plan that you don't have the resources or the expertise or the knowledge to execute, because that is essentially the whole point of this collaborative research. In the very unlikely event that the consortium doesn't have the expertise within our group, we can find someone who does. So in most cases, we will use one of our CROs, but if there's a very particular, very niche skill that we need, we can always outsource that work as well. So please do elaborate here on what it is that you can bring and what it is that you need. Finally, we ask about patents and publications that are relevant to the proposal. Few questions on your past research experience, either with us or more broadly with industry. And these are optional. This is just to support us in finding out how we can best help you. You can save at this point. As I said, you can keep coming back to this. And finally, when you're ready, before the 8th of March, so that you can submit and apply. So at this point, we don't require costs or budgets, nor do we require input from your research finance departments. Project finances are addressed once we have worked together to build a full, robust project plan. And hopefully the reason behind us not requesting finances at the moment is now clearer, because obviously as we find out what support you need and where the gaps are in your research plan, we then work to build that plan together, and obviously at the same time we build the costs and the timelines for for how we're going to run those processes. We do that all together. So we don't need any input from research finance at this stage. So essentially, these are the key points that we're really looking for in the application process. We want to know what the indication is that you're interested in treating, what the target is, how are they linked, what do we know already, how do you propose to modulate the target, what's the plan for doing that, and what do you bring to the project, and what do you need from us? So as I've mentioned earlier, the review process is a collaborative and iterative process. So I thought it would be beneficial to run through those individual stages for you now. At this point, we're at the application stage. So once your application is submitted after the 8th of March, it will then go through an initial scope assessment to see whether you meet our key criteria. And that is a very initial review to see whether you are requesting support for a psychiatric disorder that is in scope, for example, whether it's the right type of study, and whether it meets all of those criteria that I've mentioned earlier. If it doesn't, then we let you know very soon. Within a couple of weeks of the deadline, we'll be looking to let those applications that are out of scope. But if it is in scope, again, we'll let you know that we've moved on to our next review point, which is light touch due diligence, which is conducted by our partner CROs in collaboration with Medicines Discovery Catapult, myself. And that process really involves providing a package of information for our partners to review that looks at the project, how the CROs can support, any information that we need to go back to you and gather, and any assessment of risk of targeting that particular target, and any IP issues or things like that. The partners then review the projects and they either let us know that they're interested or not. If there are less than 3 partners interested, that's our magic number for pursuing a project into the development stage. So as we're acting as a syndicate, we need more than 1 partner, ideally more than 3, to be interested in a project, to have those benefits and to share the resources and the expertise and the risk on behalf of the partners. So projects that don't have 3 partners interested are then given the option for each of those partners. Say 2 partners were interested, both of those partners will be given the option to contact you directly and pursue your project outside of the Psychiatry Consortium. In the ideal situation, lots of partners will be interested in your project and will then go through that development process in collaboration with our partner CRO. We then work with you to create a first draft of a full project plan, adding in all of those parts of the expertise that we mentioned. We present that as a group to the partners that are interested in funding the project and receive their input, their critique, their additional insights and knowledge, and maybe then go on to create a second or maybe even a third draft of the project plan. And this can take some time going back and forth. Ideally, we'd like to have just 2 drafts, but sometimes a project changing directions or new information coming to light, sometimes this takes a while. Ultimately, we end up with a final project plan, which hopefully the partners confirm that they are happy with that final plan. They confirm their interest in funding, and the project can start. From a very early stage, we like to involve research offices and contract and licensing offices at your institutions in this process. And we start to discuss those terms and conditions from a very early stage, because I know that this can be a lengthy process, and that a lot of contracts and licensing teams at universities are stretched. So this can take some time. So we do like to start that process as early as possible, so that once we have project funding confirmed, we can start straight away with launching and doing some science. Now, in terms of timelines, it's and the nature of the development process, it's very difficult to set a timeline for each of these events. You will be notified at each stage whether your application has been progressed or not. And if it isn't successful, we will provide you with as much feedback as we possibly can, which will hopefully be useful for either reapplying or taking your research elsewhere. And we aim for this initial side on the left-hand side of the screen here to take up to 6 weeks, and this next stage to take 8 weeks. And this is why it takes quite a while for us to go from the deadline in March to actually launching projects in summertime. But it's all, the timelines are already dependent on how many draft iterations we go through and how early the project is approved. So we're coming towards the end of the presentation now, but before we finish and move on to questions, I wanted to cover a few of the key terms and conditions which you should consider before applying. We hope that the Psychiatry Consortium is a place where we can support the majority of researchers, but due to some of our terms and conditions, this may not be the right place for every researcher and every project. Our full terms and conditions can be found on the website, but I've highlighted the 3 main topics here which I often get asked about. Firstly, funding. Our funding is subject to a project collaboration agreement, which is signed between MDC, Medicines Discovery Catapult, we're the managing partner of the Psychiatry Consortium. So that's between us and the host institution. Our Medicines Discovery Catapult acts as the intermediate between the funding partners and the PI. And that means that all contractual financial discussions are between the host institution and myself as the program manager. And I do that on behalf of the funding partners, which is a huge advantage to institutions where there are multiple funding partners involved, and the other way around as well. So you'll only ever be dealing with the managing partner rather than having to manage funding or contracts or project decisions with multiple pharma partners. Funding is set in advance of the project starting, so we stick to a strict plan and budget throughout the project. There will be key milestones and no-go decisions which are built into the project from the very start, and funding will be linked to those decisions. Again, all of this will be mapped out before the project is initiated. In terms of costs, we only cover direct research costs, for example, salaries, consumables, and the like, and we do not cover indirect costs or overheads, as they're sometimes called. The second common question is around IP and exploitation of results. Each project is different and the terms will be confirmed on a project-by-project basis. But as a general rule, all results and any IP in those results from the project will be owned by the institution. Funding partners are granted an exclusive or a non-exclusive right to use those results and any IP contained in those results for any commercial or non-commercial purpose. That does not, however, include the disclosure of chemical structures or any tool compounds or lead compounds which are generated under the project. The partners are also granted a non-exclusive right to use the institution's background IP as necessary and relevant for the exploitation of the results. Again, that doesn't include chemical structures of tool compounds or lead compounds within the applicant's background IP. And finally, the partners are granted an option to negotiate an exclusive commercial license to any tool compounds or lead compounds, including their chemical structure. So for applicants, this is, particularly in the UK and Europe, this is a common setup. This would mean that you have the right to continue working on your research and also the option to commercialize any commercial chemistry or commercially sensitive or exciting research that comes out of these projects. And you have pharma partners there ready, waiting and committed to the project already who have the option to support you during that commercialization process. Finally, I'm often asked about publications and distribution of results during and after the project. And as a general rule, publication and presentations are generally encouraged. However, if they contain patentable subject matter or presentation would materially jeopardize any intellectual property rights, then that publication or presentation may be requested to be delayed for a set time period to allow the institution and the funding partners to take necessary steps for the protection of any patentable material. It's in everyone's best interest for this research to be published, both the academics and the funding partners. So we do everything we can to allow you to get the most out of this collaboration and to continue to teach, to research, to publish. We understand that that is the key, the cornerstone for an academic career, and we don't want to hinder that. But we do just do what we can to limit any publication or to check that there's no confidential results being shared, and to also provide an opportunity for review. And with all of these conditions, it's very difficult to agree anything at this stage without taking into account project-specific considerations. So this isn't necessarily something that we need to be overly concerned about right now at this point. And as I mentioned before, as soon as there's an indication of interest from the partners, we start discussions with licensing and contracting departments to iron out these details and to come to an agreement on these terms. Again, this is something that I would conduct on behalf of the partners and on behalf of the PI as part of our role as managing partner. So you will be supported throughout this process. I've provided you with an awful lot of information today. This webinar is being recorded and it will be available on the Psychiatry Consortium website, so you can go back and rewatch any of the sections in your own time. We also have a suite of resources available for you on the website, which includes frequently asked questions. There's even a section on papers which our partners have highlighted as the sort of research they're interested in funding, to give you an idea. It may be worth having a look at those papers and seeing whether your research is of a similar kind. And there's also the opportunity to contact me directly through our website, either via email on our contact form, or to book in a one-to-one project meeting where I'd be happy to discuss your research further with you and see whether we can talk through your project and see whether it would be a fit for the consortium. We have some time for questions now.
If you haven't already, please feel free to put those questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. I will just run through. I can see that a couple of questions have been added there already. So I'll just start to work my way through those, but please feel free to add in questions as you think of them. So we have a question relating to the scope and whether anxiety disorders are included as within scope. So that's an easy one to answer. I can confirm that anxiety disorders are in scope for this call. I suppose the most common that the partners would be looking for would be generalized anxiety disorder there, rather than some of the more niche anxiety disorders. But yes, anxiety is included. We have another question regarding sample collection and the use of biosamples in projects. So as I said, we're not looking within the project itself to collect those samples. So we would encourage, if applicants have samples already collected and available, either from previous studies or through biobanks or the like, then they could be brought into the study as a resource and studies could be done on those samples. What we want to avoid is using up the limited time that we have for these projects. 3 years as a maximum term is a limited amount of time to conduct this difficult research that we're trying to do to validate these targets. So patient recruitment and ethics approval and those kind of things that go into clinical studies are deemed to just take up too much time and too much resource. So if possible, we would ask that if you are looking to use samples, they would be collected within previous studies and accessed in the Psychiatry Consortium study. There is a question around what the partners get out of this. So I've spoken a lot throughout this webinar on what you as applicants will get from this, this partnership. And I suppose I touched on it lightly in the terms and conditions section when I talked about the IP terms and the option for the partners to license any results that come out of these studies. But more than that commercial aspect, what the partners are really looking for here is the option to access the innovation and that groundbreaking research that is coming out of academic institutions and SMEs and research labs across the globe. And yes, that opportunity to license the results and to have access to intellectual property that comes out of these studies, and if any novel tool compounds or novel chemistry is developed, the partners would have the option to license that chemistry as well. So there is the option there for them to generate a starting point for their own drug discovery projects internally within their companies. But the whole point of the consortium operating in the way that it does as a syndicate, for the partners, this really provides a vehicle for them to take the innovation coming through universities and really support and nurture that process to hope that we can then move the science along the pathway and really validate it in a way that could then be taken up by industry later on. And by doing that as a collective, the partners have the opportunity to work with multiple stakeholders. So we only fund projects that have 3 or more partners that are interested, as I mentioned during the review process. So that would mean that the risk for those partners is much more reduced. So the more partners there are, the less risk there is to that each individual partner. Also, there's a reduced cost to those partners as well because they equally split the budget for these projects. So not only do you get access to all of their innovation, but expertise and support, but it's a win-win situation for all parties involved. There's a question regarding eligibility and applicants. Are SMEs allowed to apply? Yes, we accept applications from research institutions and small and medium-sized companies as well. I would ask that you reconsider those terms and conditions and look at those carefully, because IP considerations, depending on the stage of your project, can sometimes be a concern for companies that isn't so much an issue for institutions. But yes, we absolutely welcome applications from SMEs. And we can also accept applications from collaborations as well. So we accept standalone applications or collaborative efforts either between universities and SMEs, or multiple SMEs or multiple universities. It would just be a case of when we have collaborative applications that there is a single host institution which is the lead on the project. If anybody has any further questions, please do feel free to pop them in the chat at the moment. I'll just cover in the Q&A section, sorry. I'll just cover a couple of other common questions that we see. One is around confidentiality of your application. All of our partners are under a confidentiality agreement within the Psychiatry Consortium. So your application in the first instance, when you apply to us, that is confidential and that is only seen by the members of the consortium. I would ask that in this first instance, you don't submit any commercially sensitive information or any confidential information that you wouldn't want to be shared. In the case where you may have tool compounds or novel chemistry that you would want to bring into the project, that would not be shared with the pharma partners. That would be a case of a discussion between the Medicines Discovery Catapult and potentially our partner CRO and yourself to assess that novel chemistry in the scope of the application, and that would be done under a confidentiality agreement. But please don't put any confidential chemistry or confidential information in your initial application. Another common question is around the publication timelines. So I alluded earlier that there may be a slight delay requested from the time that you find the results to when you're able to publish them. And that is not to limit your ability to publish, that is just purely to allow the partners involved to assess the potential risk around IP in publishing that data. When we say a delay, we're talking a matter of months rather than years. So it would be from the time that you present the results to the partners within the project. Say you receive your first results within 8 months of the project starting. We would then be talking a set number of months, maybe 6 months from that time point to allow us to review. So it isn't, the trigger is you gaining the results, not the end of the project. So it wouldn't be a case of waiting until the project is ended and then that time lag starting. So we would hope that you would be able to publish within the project lifecycle, and you will be supported and encouraged to do so. I think that is all of the questions that I've had through on the chat. Is there any final questions that anybody wants to pop into the Q&A section? I'll just wait another couple of minutes in case anybody is typing. There is also the opportunity to take a look at our website. I posted those resources earlier. There are frequently asked questions on the website itself, which cover all aspects from terms and conditions to the review process, a lot of the things that have been mentioned already, and the overall scope of the call and timelines and things like that. So if you do think of a question afterwards, the first port of call would be to check those frequently asked questions section on the website. You can also book a meeting with me if you have any specific project related questions. If you want to discuss whether your project that you have in mind would be a fit for the consortium, or whether there is a particular angle that you feel your project may be best taking, then do feel free to put a meeting in with myself, and I'd be happy to chat through your project and advise as best I can. So if there are no more questions, I will thank you all for attending. Thank you for your time, and I very much look forward to looking through your applications and working with you in the future. Thank you.